This video is about James Harden and what will happen with him this postseason, because I honestly think he could potentially shake things up in a very interesting way. Hello everybody, welcome to Oscar Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference in terms of how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm, so it is much appreciated. Now, the first thing to be said is I think the Houston thing doesn't make any sense. I do understand how the Houston Rockets, from like an organization, pure business standpoint, could see it as like, hey, you know, James Harden puts butts in seats. This AAU team we've been running for the past few years really doesn't, and potentially James Harden's leadership and veteran experience could help this team get that AAU factor reduced a little bit. And you obviously also have an excellent head coach for what, you know, what he does off the court otherwise, but an excellent head coach, Ime Udoka. You want to potentially try winning now with that. But to me, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, maybe Kevin Porter Jr. a little bit, and especially Alfred Şengün, I think all those guys have good upside, and I think you should, especially with Şengün and Jalen, try and build around that and see what you can do. Honestly, I could see Şengün, I might be saying that wrong. Maybe it's just Şengün and I'm putting an H in there for no reason, but I'm pretty sure it's not. There is a bug in here. Regardless, you could probably do like a poor man's Jokic Murray with those two, something along those lines. I think Alfred has shown some Jokic-esque things. Obviously, I'm not going to directly say he's going to be the next Jokic because I think that is a stretch, but a very, very good and even potential all-star level center, I can see it for sure. So Houston doesn't make a lot of sense to me from Houston's point of view, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me from James Harden's point of view, because if you're James Harden, are you not trying to win? Are you not trying to get that championship to like secure your legacy? Again, from a business standpoint, maybe he feels Houston will pay him the most money. He also obviously likes those Houston strip clubs. So from a lifestyle standpoint, from his day-to-day life standpoint, Houston does make some sense. And if he's just one of those guys who ultimately doesn't really care about winning a championship, then I guess that's the case. But at the same time, I feel like he would have never asked out of Houston if that was the case in the first place, and especially would have never asked to go specifically to teams that are really freaking good. So it seems counterintuitive to what he's shown us in the past. Just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Next thing I want to talk about is what happens with Philly if James Harden leaves, because frankly, I just don't know that there's a way to really replace the potential production of James Harden. Now, he obviously sucked in the postseason for a lot of it. He also was good for some games, of course. He had like a 45-point game in game 1 versus Boston, but for the most part, more disappointing than overall positive. So with that being the case, I do think, you know, postseason wise, you could replicate the terrible production you got this year, but you hope you get a good James Harden postseason year and suddenly you're in the NBA Finals. So if you don't get James Harden back, and if you don't replace that production to some capacity, I know I've seen Fred VanVleet rumors, but like, is Fred VanVleet getting 20 and 10? You know what I mean? Maybe, who knows? But probably not. At that point, are you not trading Joel Embiid, because he's soon to be 30 years old? They have not gone past the second round. I'm not saying that the Sixers should and would decide on their own volition to trade Joel Embiid, but I would understand if Joel Embiid was like, all right, if James Harden's not here, screw this. I'm not going to bother with that. So for the Sixers, it's interesting what they do if James does leave. Obviously, there's not much to talk about if James stays, because, you know, not a lot of flexibility in terms of adjusting that roster. I'm sure they'll make a move or two that's definitely worthy of note, but for the most part, probably going to be the same old, same old. Now, another rumor that I saw that has become less so, and especially in light of this Bradley Beal thing, has been James Harden going to the Phoenix Suns. Now, I understand why you might look at that and see, you know, if I hated the Bradley Beal thing so much, which I very clearly expressed in my video about those rumors, I would obviously hate the James Harden thing, but that's not necessarily true. It isn't great for sure. I do think they would be better suited doing something else, going with a different player, going with different players, plural. I have long made the argument that 3 stars generally isn't actually good unless one of those 3 stars is like a specialist type archetype, who's like someone who doesn't really do much with the ball. Maybe they're more defensive oriented to begin with, like a Draymond Green or a Klay Thompson. That's why 4 stars for the Warriors did not matter whatsoever, because they had KD as the shot creator, Steph Curry as the Steph Curry, and and Klay Thompson, more of a 3-and-D guy. Draymond Green on offense, pretty much just a facilitator and occasionally a play finisher. And then, of course, a defensive guy. Pretty sure he won DPOY in like 2017, 2018, something like that. So yeah, you need those guys who are going to, you know, fit well together. And I just don't think that Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker fit well together. And I don't know that James Harden's necessarily a perfect fit there, because Devin Booker and Kevin Durant like to have the ball in their hands. And as we well know, James Harden likes to have the ball in his hand. With the difference there is Bradley Beal is not a generational playmaker. That is a huge difference. And I think it's kind of annoying to me how I've seen some people argue like, well, the Brooklyn Nets with Harden, Kyrie, and KD, when they actually played together, when they were actually healthy, they did look phenomenal. It was a lot of outside stuff and a lot of, you know, dumb shit that resulted in that team ultimately blowing up, as well as, of course, injuries. I see your point there. But Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, not the same as James Harden, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant. And the reason, James Harden would be the point guard of that team. He would be a guy probably averaging damn near 13 assists a game if you really wanted to, while providing, of course, enough gravity as a scorer, will grab enough of the defense's attention that it will bring pressure off of Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and it will allow James Harden to be a better playmaker than he would otherwise be, as I've obviously previously ranted about being a playmaker that can't score. Yeah, I mean, it especially makes it harder to double Booker or Durant, because, like, are you gonna double one of those guys and leave James Harden wide open? Like, we're still talking about a historically great three-point shooter, even if he's been much more inconsistent in the past few years. We're still talking about someone who can get to the free throw line kind of whenever he wants, someone who's very good at driving even still, even if he's lost that burst. If you give him a straight up advantage going into the drive by doubling, then yeah, he can definitely make something happen. And of course, he's going to make that pass wherever there's just the slightest bit of advantage given up, he's going to be capable of it. So that makes a lot more sense to me. I do think it'd be damn funny to see James Harden and Kevin Durant together for a third time, and seemingly ill-suited for a second time, but it makes more sense than Bradley Beal does. But I would strongly make the argument that they should still not do that. They should still try and sign some wings, some centers, trade DeAndre Ayton for, you know, some depth, some defensive guys, some catch and shoot guys. And ideally, they do need a playmaker, which is the reason it makes some sense. But just, I feel like you could get a better playmaker for way less money than James Harden's probably going to ask, and a playmaker that would be more consistent overall rather than James Harden. But it is an interesting thing to ponder. I do think there is some validity to that idea. That said, if I'm going to make an overall estimate as to where James Harden ends up, truthfully, I think he ends up back on the Sixers. As much as discussion as there has been, obviously I'm doing the discussion right now. As much discussion as there has been, I just don't feel like Houston makes sense for either party. I realize why it's been discussed. I realize why both sides considered it, but I really don't know if, when push comes to shove, when it comes time to pulling the trigger on that decision, that either party would really feel super good about it. Not that James necessarily would feel super good about Philly, but I'm looking around the rest of the league. There's not a lot of teams that can really sign someone, period. And if they're going to do it, they're going to do it by giving up a lot of assets and thus making said team worse. Maybe he goes to the Golden State Warriors. Wouldn't that be funny? But no. Yeah, that's my prediction. Probably back in Philly. If not, I guess he goes to Houston, and if not, I guess he goes to Phoenix. But yeah, that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.